11 killed after skydiving plane crashes moments after takeoff in France. First time jumpers among victims. A tragic plane crash in eastern France has claimed the lives of at least 11 people after a small aircraft carrying skydivers crashed just moments after takeoff on Sunday morning. Now, the real investigation begins as we explore every side of this story on our AI podcast.
Today we're looking into a tragedy that really kind of shatters those unspoken assumptions we make about extreme sports.
Yeah, it really does.
Because, when you sign up for something that pushes your boundaries, like skydiving, you naturally focus your fear on the defining element of the activity.
Right.
You worry about the parachute opening.
Exactly. You're focused on the jump itself.
Right. You don't spend much time, or any time really, scrutinizing the airplane taking you up there. I mean, you just view the plane as the elevator to get to the actual event.
You just assume the elevator works.
Exactly. Well, we have a set of reports today titled Tragedy in Tomblaine, the Nancy skydiving disaster. And our mission in this deep dive is to figure out how a routine flight turned fatal in mere seconds, to understand the devastating human cost, and to explore what the ongoing investigation means for the broader world of recreational aviation.
It is a profoundly difficult incident to examine, but unpacking the sequence of events is vital. Our goal is to synthesize the facts as we currently have them, stripping away the sensationalism, to give you a clear-eyed understanding of the mechanics of the tragedy.
Right.
We really need to look closely at the specific aircraft model involved, the physics of low-altitude flight, and the incredibly complex web of factors that investigators are currently untangling.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are looking at a Sunday morning, shortly after 11 a.m. local time. This is near the city of Nancy in the Grand Est region of France.
Just a typical morning.
Yeah, the weather is typical for the morning. The day is just getting started. And at the Nancy-Essey Airfield, a German-registered single-engine plane is taking off.
Right, and this aircraft had been specifically hired by a company that organizes introductory tandem skydiving experiences.
Right. But just moments after the wheels leave the tarmac, the unthinkable happens. The plane climbs, it appears to lose control, and falls rapidly to the ground.
And the sheer scale of the devastation becomes apparent almost immediately. According to French authorities, there were 11 people on board that aircraft.
11.
Yeah. And tragically, everyone believed to have been on that flight lost their lives.
It's just, when you look at the manifest, it paints this heartbreaking picture of two very different groups coming together for this one flight.
It really does.
You have the pilot and then 5 highly experienced skydiving instructors. I mean, these are professionals who likely spend as much time in the air as they do on the ground.
Right. For them, it's another day at the office.
Exactly. And then you have 5 passengers strapping in to make their very first tandem parachute jump.
And they were placing their complete trust in the professionals and the equipment, likely experiencing that intense mix of, nervous anticipation and excitement that comes with the first jump.
Yeah, and the detail that is incredibly hard to comprehend, it comes from Thierry Pichet. He's the president of the Meurthe et Moselle Nursing Council.
Right. He provided some very difficult context.
He did. He confirmed that those 5 first-time jumpers were not just a random group of thrill seekers. They were all self-employed private practice nurses from the Nancy region.
Wow.
Yeah, they had organized this entire introductory skydiving experience as a special group outing.
I mean, private practice nursing is an incredibly demanding, high-stress profession. It requires deep reserves of empathy, long hours, and constantly carrying the physical and emotional burdens of patients.
It's exhausting work.
It is. Knowing they were frontline healthcare workers just adds a profound layer of grief to the whole event.
I keep thinking about what it takes to do that job, and how essential it is to find an outlet. You have a group of hardworking professionals looking to share a life-affirming adrenaline rush outside of their clinics. And for that anticipation to turn into the sudden, jarring reality of an aviation failure, it's a terrifying shift. It really grounds this tragedy in a deeply relatable human context. These were people whose life's work was carrying right up until the end.
What's critical to understand here is how something like this happens so suddenly. We have to look at the aerodynamic reality of the climb phase.
Right, because the witnesses said it fell rapidly.
Exactly. Witnesses reported that the plane climbed, appeared to lose control, and fell rapidly. In aviation, the moments immediately following takeoff are universally recognized as the most vulnerable.
Why is that?
Well, a fully loaded plane is fighting a massive battle against gravity, and the margin for error is effectively zero.
I want to break down what losing control actually means in this context, because usually when people think of a plane crash, they picture an engine failing and the plane sort of gliding down, right?
Like a controlled descent.
But this didn't glide. Witnesses said it fell rapidly. That tells me this wasn't just an engine dying. This was something fundamentally disrupting the plane's ability to stay in the air.
You're touching on the concept of an aerodynamic stall.
Okay.
And when people hear the word stall, they usually think of a car engine sputtering and dying.
Yeah, like stalling at a red light.
Exactly. But in aviation, an aerodynamic stall has absolutely nothing to do with the engine. It is entirely about the wings. For a wing to generate lift, air has to flow smoothly over and under it.
Okay, that makes sense.
If the nose of the airplane points too far upward, what we call a high angle of attack, that smooth airflow separates from the wing. It essentially breaks apart into turbulent air.
Wow.
And when that happens, the wing instantly stops generating lift, and the airplane essentially becomes a falling brick.
So it's like sticking your hand out the window of a moving car, right?
It's a great way to picture it.
If your hand is flat, it glides through the air. But if you tilt the front of your hand up too sharply, the air catches it, pushes it back, and you lose all that smooth gliding motion.
A perfect analogy. Now imagine that happening to a fully loaded aircraft that is only 200 feet off the ground.
Oh, man.
If you experience an aerodynamic stall at 10,000 feet, a pilot simply drops the nose of the plane, picks up speed, regains that smooth airflow over the wings, and recovers.
Because they have the room to do it.
Exactly. But at 200 feet, you have absolutely no altitude to trade for airspeed. If the wing stalls, gravity takes over immediately. You simply do not have the physical space between the aircraft and the ground to execute a recovery.
The suddenness of that physics lesson is terrifying. And that sheer suddenness dictates where this aircraft actually ended up.
Right.
Because it didn't glide into an empty field. It fell right out of the sky into the suburb of Tomblaine, just outside of Nancy.
Right into a populated area.
Yeah. It came down onto a road right near an Auchan supermarket, adjacent to residential areas and a public bicycle path.
And the specific geography of the crash site initially caused widespread alarm among local authorities. Yves Seguy, the prefect of Meurthe and Moselle, made initial announcements warning that the provisional death toll of 11 could rise.
Naturally, I assume that.
They were deeply concerned about collateral casualties on the ground because the area is a highly active community space.
But wait, missing bystanders in that environment is hard to comprehend. We're talking about Sunday morning, shortly after 11 a.m.
Right.
This is prime time for people running weekend errands, walking their dogs, getting groceries at the supermarket. For a fully loaded airplane to fall out of the sky into that exact environment without injuring a single person on the ground, I mean, it highlights the terrifying randomness of the event.
It really is miraculous.
A fraction of a second difference in the trajectory and the scale of the disaster on the ground would have been unimaginable.
The only secondary effect mentioned in the reports was a temporary power outage in the Tomblaine area following the accident.
Oh, really?
Yeah, while officials haven't definitively confirmed if severed lines or infrastructure impacts from the crash caused the outage, the timing makes it highly probable.
That makes sense.
Regardless, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the local and national infrastructure had to mobilize immediately. Emergency responders secured the site, and Hervé Ferron, the mayor of Tomblaine, stepped in to manage the community's shock.
Yeah, Mayor Ferron called it an unprecedented tragedy. He stated he didn't remember a disaster of this magnitude ever hitting their community.
I can't imagine they've seen anything like this.
No. He also set up a private, secure location where the grieving families could gather, be shielded from the public, and receive psychological support.
Rapid institutional support is vital in these chaotic early hours.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, the legal and investigative machinery geared up.
Mm.
Local prosecutor Emery Lecote launched a formal investigation immediately, working closely with the Nancy-Metz Air Transport Gendarmerie Brigade.
So they got right to work.
They did. The severity of the incident even prompted an impending visit from French Interior Minister Laurent Nunez. The entire apparatus of the state pivoted to figure out the root cause.
Mayor Ferron also explicitly noted that at this moment there is no explanation. And that void is exactly what the Air Transport Gendarmerie Brigade has to fill.
Right.
To do that, their primary focus turns to the specific machine involved. And here we are looking at the Pilatus PC-6 Porter.
The Pilatus PC-6 Porter is a Swiss-built, single-engine utility aircraft. Understand its role in this tragedy, you have to look at its legendary reputation in the aviation world.
It's pretty well known, isn't it?
It is incredibly famous for its STAL capabilities. That stands for short takeoff and landing.
Right, stale.
It has a massive wing, a very powerful turboprop engine, and it can operate from incredibly short, unpaved runways in the mountains or the jungle. It is essentially designed to be a flying tractor.
I imagine a skydiving company loves stale oil capabilities because it's all about turnaround time, right?
Exactly.
If you can take off from a tiny strip, climb to altitude incredibly fast, drop your jumpers, and dive back down quickly, you can run significantly more flights in a single day. It maximizes operational efficiency.
Time is money in that business.
Right. But that makes me question if that extreme efficiency comes at a cost when pushed to the limit over and over again.
That is precisely the angle investigators will evaluate. The PC-6 has been a beloved workhorse globally for decades, with production only recently ending in 2022.
So they made them for a long time.
They did. It is going to take a beating. However, the rigorous demands of rapid-cycle skydiving flights put immense repetitive stress on the airframe and the engine.
And here's where it gets really interesting, or rather deeply troubling.
Yeah.
Despite its rugged reputation, the sources detail a dark history of the PC-6, specifically within the skydiving industry.
This is a crucial point.
In October 2013, there's a crash in Fernelmont, Belgium. A Pilatus PC-6 carrying 10 skydivers, and a pilot crashed shortly after takeoff. 11 people on board, all 11 killed.
The parallels between Fernelmont and Tomblaine are chilling.
It's the exact same scenario. And it continues. In August 2022, in South Africa at Rand Airport, a South African police service PC-6 crashed, again, moments after taking off.
Right.
5 passengers were killed, and the pilot survived, but with serious injuries. So we're looking at a trusted utility vehicle that, for some reason, suffers catastrophic, fatal failures under these very specific operational conditions.
Let's explain a pattern.
It points towards something inherent about the extreme demands of skydiving operations, pushing this specific airframe to a breaking point.
This raises an important question for the investigators. They have to look at the unique physics of a skydiving operation. You are loading a small plane with a heavy human payload.
And they aren't just sitting there.
Exactly. More importantly, those people aren't sitting still strapped into airline seats. As they prepare to jump, or even as they shift during the aggressive climb, they move. This causes sudden shifts in the aircraft's center of gravity.
Let me try to visualize that. I imagine it's like putting a group of adults in a small canoe, right?
Yes, perfect.
If everyone suddenly shifts toward the back of the canoe at the exact same time, the front of the canoe shoots violently upward out of the water.
Exactly.
Or think of a seesaw tipped backward. If you move all the heaviest weights to the very edge of the lowered side, the elevated side becomes almost impossible to pull back down.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize the center of gravity shift. Now, map that canoe analogy onto an airplane climbing steeply just after takeoff.
Oh, that's a scary thought.
If you have a sudden shift of weight toward the back of the aircraft, the nose of that plane wants to pitch violently upward. The pilot has to aggressively push the flight controls forward to counter that weight shift and keep the nose down.
Just fighting the physics of it.
Right. If the center of gravity shifts too far aft, meaning too far backward, the pilot literally might not have enough physical authority in the flight controls to push the nose down.
Which brings us right back to the aerodynamic stall we discussed earlier.
Yes, exactly.
If the nose pitches up uncontrollably, the wings lose their smooth airflow, they stop generating lift, and at 200 feet, the plane simply falls.
That is the leading aerodynamic theory for many skydiving crashes. But the investigators are walking into a complex maze because they cannot look at the center of gravity in a vacuum.
You have to look at everything.
They have to evaluate a deeply intertwined web of factors. First, they will look at the weather. Even on a seemingly pleasant Sunday morning, the atmosphere can be incredibly volatile. They will check for phenomena like microbursts or wind shear.
We hear those terms a lot in aviation incidents. A microburst is essentially a sudden, massive downdraft of cold air, right?
That's right.
Like a column of air just slamming into the ground and spreading outward.
Precisely. If an aircraft flies into a microburst at low altitude, it first hits a massive headwind that increases its lift, but seconds later, it flies into a massive tailwind that strips away all its lift.
Wow.
It essentially swats the plane out of the sky. Wind shear is a similar, rapid, unpredictable change in wind speed or direction. At high altitudes, it's just turbulence. At 200 feet, it can be fatal.
So investigators are looking at weight shifts, they're looking at invisible weather anomalies, and they also have to tear apart the mechanical history of the machine itself.
They will meticulously reconstruct the maintenance history. With a workhorse plane like the PC-6, They have to determine if every single service bulletin was followed perfectly.
Right, looking for any tiny flaw.
Exactly. They will look for hidden metal fatigue from thousands of high-stress cycles. Did a flight control surface jam? Did the turboprop engine suffer a catastrophic internal failure at the worst possible moment?
And then there is the most sensitive variable of all, right? The human element, the pilot's actions.
Evaluating the pilot's reaction time is agonizingly difficult work. Investigators have to ask how the pilot reacted in the 2 or 3 seconds they had to manage an emergency.
Only 2 or 3 seconds.
Yeah. Did a minor mechanical issue or a slight wind shear become a fatal stall because of delayed reaction? Or did the pilot do everything humanly possible, perfectly executing emergency procedures, but the aircraft's center of gravity or mechanical failure made it simply unrecoverable?
It's impossible to know right away.
Separating pilot error from an inherent mechanical or aerodynamic failure requires meticulously reconstructing the flight data, analyzing the physical wreckage, and completing metallurgical tests.
It is a devastatingly complex process. It means that the families of those nurses, the families of the instructors, and the community of Nancy are going to be waiting a long time for answers.
Unfortunately, yes.
The reports make it very clear that this investigation is expected to take weeks, if not months, before any final official report is released.
Waiting for the comprehensive final report is standard for aviation, but incredibly difficult for those seeking closure.
I can't imagine.
But the physical evidence must tell the story without assumption.
So what does this all mean for you, listening to this? Why does the crash of a skydiving plane in eastern France matter beyond the immediate, profound tragedy for the families involved?
It's a question of perspective.
I think it fundamentally challenges our perception of risk and the trust we place in underlying systems. When you decide to step outside your comfort zone for an adventure, whether that's skydiving, a helicopter tour, or even a deep-sea fishing trip, you implicitly assume that the foundational mechanics are foolproof.
You have to, or you'd never do it.
Exactly. You assume the regulatory agencies have ironclad oversight. You assume the vehicle you're getting into is perfectly safe for the job it is doing. We worry about the parachute failing. We never worry about the plane falling out of the sky.
Right.
A tragedy like the one in Tomblaine shatters that illusion. It is a harsh reminder that the machinery operating behind the scenes of our recreational thrills is still subject to the unforgiving laws of physics, mechanical wear and tear, and catastrophic failure.
That sobering realization is exactly why critical thinking and patience in the face of tragedy are so essential.
Yeah.
It is entirely natural to want immediate answers, to want to declare a specific aircraft unsafe, or to blame an operator. But aviation safety only evolves through the meticulous, often painfully slow process of investigation.
It takes time.
It does. The lessons learned from the structural analysis, the weight and balance calculations, or the pilot action review of this Nancy crash will eventually become the safety mandates of tomorrow. That is how the global aviation system improves over time, even though the cost of that improvement is unimaginably high.
It is an incredibly heavy price. As we wait for those answers, there is a final, lingering thought I want to leave you with today.
What's that?
It builds off the troubling history of this specific aircraft. When consumers sign up for a once-in-a-lifetime extreme experience, like those 5 nurses did, they place blind, complete trust in the operator. They assume the equipment is standard and safe.
They do.
But if a specific model of aircraft, like the Pilatus PC-6 Porter, has a documented history of fatal incidents in that exact specific industry, it raises a profound question about informed consent.
That's a fascinating point.
Should participants be required to be informed about the specific vehicle's safety history before they ever step aboard? If you knew the statistical history of the elevator taking you up, would you still ride it to the top floor?
It is a vital question of transparency in an industry built on adrenaline and trust.
Think about that the next time you prepare to take a leap of faith.
Okay, one question for you. Do you think first-time adventure activities like skydiving should have stricter safety regulations and aircraft inspections? Or was this tragic crash simply an unforeseeable accident that no one could have prevented? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.